You know, when you have the creator of a very spooky character bring back that character in a new story, sometimes it feels like you're on the cusp of something special. And I'm kind of getting that vibe of what Charles Soule is doing with Muse in this story. Because Muse is one of those characters who I think is more well known now, because I think most people know what he does and his abilities, which we'll talk more about throughout this video. But I got this feeling that Muse is going to have a very big moment in this story, in a way that we might not expect, though possibly in a way that we do. But either way, after this issue, I think it's going to get crazy. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so coming back, this picks up after Eddie and Carnage's recent encounter with Misty Knight from issue 5, when we saw Eddie help Misty find the missing passengers who Carnage had hidden away and held in stasis as a form of leverage to hold over Eddie. But like we saw after Eddie helped Misty by using Carnage to find out where they were, right after that she pulled the old, yeah, I know you helped, but I still gotta take you in. Only for Eddie to be like, nah, we ain't doing that. Before he disarmed her and left Misty in the Colorado Rocky Mountains, where her backup would eventually find her. But not much long after and not too far away, we find Eddie passed out with his symbiote very much active. And one thing to keep in mind here when it comes to the symbiosis between Eddie and Carnage is the fact that Eddie has near full control over the physical aspects of the Carnage symbiote, like when it comes to creating scythes and things of that sort, which is why in moments like when Misty came after them, Carnage was practically begging for Eddie to kill her. And it's something that Eddie struggled with for a brief moment, and we'll talk about why that was the case in a little bit, but for now I just want you guys to keep in mind that the majority of the physical control belongs to Eddie. But while he's out cold here, Eddie sees a series of recent moments where the Carnage symbiote is being used to kill all sorts of wildlife, only to have this interrupted by a woman in green, who first calls his name and then goes on to say, "Remember me." And even though we're not told who she is right away, and we don't see Eddie converse with her, with Eddie seeing her holding this green phoenix, this is his first clue to understanding who this person is. And now when this wakes Eddie up, he finds himself surrounded by all the dead animals that he saw just a moment ago. So much like in issue 1, when Eddie woke up and realized that Carnage had taken over his body after Eddie was exhausted, he believes the same thing happened here. So right away he's like, "Carnage, what did you do?" Only for Carnage to tell him, "I didn't do anything. Eddie, this was all you." So of course Eddie's like, that doesn't make any sense because he was asleep. So Carnage tells him, yes you were, and your body through your symbiote was trying to give you what you need. And even still Eddie refuses to believe that he did this. So Carnage tells him here, "Eddie, look at your hands. You've got the shakes, boyo, and it'll only get worse from here." And the way that Eddie sees this, he believes that Carnage is trying to manipulate him. But given the current state that Eddie's in, Carnage just tells him, "I can't talk to you when you're like this. Come down here and let your old friend Carnage lay out some hard truths for you." So right away, Eddie reluctantly attends this meeting with Carnage, because if nothing else, he wants to know what's happening to him right now. And the first thing Carnage tells him is that this shouldn't be a surprise, because Carnage told Eddie before, "If you don't kill, I'll kill you." Which in the here and now of course comes off as a threat and an admission of guilt. So Eddie comes back like, "Oh, so you are doing this?" And that's where Carnage tells him, "Eddie, no, you're in control. I can't use my symbiote body independently, not unless you allow it. You know that. Just listen to me. I want you to kill people, but I also need it. And since we're bonded, so do you. That's why your body killed those animals while you were asleep. I mean, it didn't solve the issue. They were mindless beasts, but A for effort. This isn't what I want. Eddie, I'm starting to think we can do great things together, but you gotta feed the need. Why don't we go after Muse? He seemed promising, a real monster. We can kill him and you won't feel a twinge of remorse." So right there, Eddie's like, "Muse, he's across the country, back in Chicago." And so Carnage is like, "Yeah, you're right. We probably don't have time. This is all going to accelerate. We'll want to find someone local." A shame about Muse though. He seemed like my kind of guy. And now right after this, we head back over to Chicago, where we find Muse, who's out casually shopping for supplies. And all I'll say is when Muse is going on a supply run, it's one of those things where it's like, if you know, you know. And now when he gets here, this guy behind the counter does not know who he is. But even still, he's definitely disturbed by Muse's appearance, because right away he assumes that Muse is here to rob the place. And the clerk throws his hands up like, "Take what you want, I don't want any trouble." But Muse is just like, no, I'm here for art supplies. Someone burnt down my studio. I lost everything. Every brush, every blade, every chisel. I have to start from nothing. And so the clerk's more or less like, "Oh man, my bad. You know, the mask just threw me off." And that's where Muse tells him, "I'm an artist. People don't need to know my face, just my work." And man, I'll tell you right now, if I was shopping in this store, I'd have put everything back on the shelf and just walked out. And when Muse says people don't need to know my face, just my work, the clerk's just like, hey, whatever you say, son, speak your truth. And after that, he's like, what are you looking for? We've got a little bit of everything. And Muse is just like, yes, you have a good selection. And I'm telling you, the camera would have panned to me right here, and all you would have seen was a spinning paint can and the door still closing, because I would have been gone. And as you may have guessed, just moments later, Muse has the other customers here roped up so he can collect blood from each of their bodies. And now the thing with Muse, with him collecting these people's blood, it's a key part of him shopping for art supplies, because Muse uses the blood of his victims in all of his art. Like in Daredevil Volume 5, where we saw this huge mural that Muse created with him using the blood of over 100 victims. So in this case, with him taking not as much blood or supplies, even though he's not working on something as large, nonetheless, it's a very chilling experience watching Muse work on a project from start to finish. Because I mean, with the way he handles his victims, that's one thing. But on top of that, when we see him use his abilities, it just gets creepier. And we'll see more of that as this continues. And we'll talk about what his abilities are and how they work, because they play a huge role in the art that he creates. And it's one of the main reasons why I believe if Muse bonds with Carnage, they're going to make the world one crazy canvas. But in the here and now, as Muse takes a handful of brushes as well as the bottles of blood. At first he was about to be picky with the brushes, then he was like, beggars can't be choosers. And then he asked the clerk, how much do I owe you? But the dude is gagged, so he can't talk. So Muse is like, nothing? How gracious. You are a true patron of the arts. I am grateful. But between us, it's no way to run a business. And then he looks over at the customers and he's like, I thank you for your contributions as well. Through my work, you will live forever. And now when Muse goes back to his studio, we jump back over to Eddie and Carnage for a moment, with Eddie deciding to head down to a nearby town to find a library and use their computer so he can search for a target that's closer than Muse. And you know, Carnage is definitely behind the idea of them being around more people. But as they head down, for a quick moment here, we hear the voice again saying, remember me. But it's only like a lingering voice still. And as they head down into the town, Carnage asks Eddie, what's the deal with Belly Bushkin? Because she's the one who's supposed to be giving them the leads on serial killers that they could go after. So Eddie just tells Carnage Belly's burnt, because after the plane situation and the hostages, the FBI is looking for Eddie. So without a doubt, they'll be keeping an eye on her. And aside from that, Eddie just doesn't want to make things more complicated for Belly. So after that, Carnage is like, this is just a thought, honestly, just a suggestion, but have you considered going to New York and killing her? And right there, Eddie's just like, shut up, Carnage. But after that, Carnage says something that stops Eddie in his tracks. Because next, Carnage suggests that Eddie gets cleaned up before they head down into town and talk to people, because they look and smell like death. And Carnage is like, trust me, I know. So right there, Eddie's like, okay, wait a minute. WTF do you think you're doing, Carnage? So Eddie stops and he says here, where are the threats? The screaming, you telling me if I don't kill someone, you'll murder me. You're acting totally different. Friendly. What are you trying to pull? And right there, Carnage tells him, no, Eddie, we're not friends. Would you like to know the truth? And he tells him, I hate you. You're pathetic. You've held astonishing cosmic power more than once, and you did everything you could to avoid using it to its fullest potential. You chose weakness every time. Every time. But there is something I like about you. Something I like very much. Getting you to kill someone. Getting you to want to crack the door open and let the darkness in. It's incredible. It's different than with Cletus. He wanted to. He always wanted to. You don't. It's unique when you kill, a special pleasure. I've never felt anything quite like it. I want more. I'll be whoever I need to be to make that happen. You know the saying, you catch more flies with honey. Now, tell me, Eddie Brock, am I lying? And now from here, for a while we jump back and forth between Muse and Eddie Brock Carnage, because now with Muse back in the studio, back at the warehouse, he's getting ready to find out who burnt his studio to the ground. And the way that he's able to do this is because Muse has the ability to draw all types of sensory inputs into himself like a black hole. So the smell, the feel, the sound, any and everything that would be left behind here, Muse will be able to pick it up and interpret it into an image of who was here. Because back in Eddie Brock Carnage issues 4 and 5, when Eddie burnt down Muse's studio and destroyed all of his work and supplies, like Muse said, this still didn't completely destroy the remnants of who had been there before and who did this, which was why at the time Muse was like, whoever did this, you're my new obsession. Because right away Muse knew that this time, instead of creating something just out of inspiration or to send a message, instead this time he knew he was going in detective mode. So when he gets back, he looks at his blank canvas and he's like, alright, who were you? You strange person who decided to destroy my work? You came to my place of inspiration, my most intimate space, and took from me the thing that mattered most. But you left something too. Pieces of yourself. Impressions. Yes, I have what I need. Let's begin. And as we go back and forth, we see Eddie get some clothes and get cleaned up as Muse begins to paint. But what's really crazy is how when Muse continues, first he's like, yes, this is right. But right after that, he's like, no, this is very wrong. So he stabs a hole through the canvas with the other end of the brush because the first image, it's not all the way there. And around this time, you also got Carnage who's telling Eddie that he needs to get some sleep, only for Eddie to basically be like, no chance of that, since he's still worried about Carnage taking over again. So from here, they continue to make their way to the library to use the computer and find more killers. But in the meantime, with Muse, he's back in Chicago like, why can't I see it? And it's not directly explained to us as far as the reason why Muse isn't able to pull it all together in one go. Though I imagine it has a lot to do with the whole situation with Eddie and Carnage, with how their symbiosis is very conflicting, yet still bonded in a unique way. So for Muse, aside from the fire, I imagine that he's getting all sorts of mixed signals. But eventually when Muse looks through the hole that he punched through that painting, he's like, wait, that's interesting. Just before he sets a blank canvas behind it so he can paint through the first image and type the next. But as we look over at Eddie, as he's typing in the computer, he begins to write what appears to be Green Phoenix, which then has Carnage like, okay, Eddie, what are you doing? Just before Eddie has a seizure and passes out, which now has Carnage like, hey, I told you, Eddie, you should have been looking for a target. While back over in Chicago, Muse is putting the finishing touches on his painting, to where now after stacking these two canvases and painting through one to the other, Muse now has a face to put with his new obsession, even though he doesn't have a name to put with his face just yet. And back over at the library, we see the EMTs come and pick up Eddie, and since he doesn't have no ID, they're like, this guy's a John Doe, possibly in his 30s, maybe early 40s, with symptoms of dehydration, malnourishment, he was seizing, and now he's unconscious. So off the rip, they think Eddie's been abusing some substances. But again, with him not having any ID on him, they don't know who he is. And one of the last things we hear the EMT say is whatever this guy's into, he's been hitting it pretty hard. No ID, nothing on him at all. Hopefully you guys can get him talking once we bring him in and find out what he needs. And the next thing we see is Eddie's body doing what Carnage had described earlier when he told Eddie that he needs what Carnage needs. And if he doesn't give Carnage those kills, Eddie's body's gonna take them. And it's only gonna get worse. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like. Oh, and I also want to say here, before I forget, but with the scene before, how excited Carnage was to meet Muse. And I mean, before Eddie set him up and burnt down the whole studio. I wonder if this is something that's gonna change, with Carnage recently realizing what he likes so much about being bonded with Eddie. Because for most of this series, there's been that question if Carnage will bond with Muse and leave Eddie. And I'll admit, for me, it wasn't until now this story had me like, I don't know. Carnage just might stay with Eddie just to get that special feeling every time Eddie kills. But let me know what you guys think. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.